Welcome to the webinar on food's impact on mental health. My name is Jill Bryan, and I am a registered dietitian and wellness specialist with PEHP. Today's webinar will explore how lifestyle and specifically how nutrition and diet affect mental health and discuss small changes you can make to your diet to improve your overall mental well-being. There is growing research and scientific evidence to support the idea that diet and several mental health issues are closely linked, and the research does show that improving diet can improve mental well-being. So I want to start off by talking about a little bit about mental health and overall health. There are many dimensions of wellness that contribute to overall health. So the World Health Organization has defined both health and mental health. So they define health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. When looking specifically at mental health, it is defined as a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with stressful times in their life, the ability to develop to kind of your full potential, to be able to learn and work adequately, and to contribute to the betterment of their community. We know that having good mental health is critical to everyone's overall well-being. Mental health disorders affect millions of Americans each year. We know that mental health challenges can impact everyone, everyone of all ages, genders, races, and different backgrounds. While stigma still remains about mental health issues, I think people are becoming more willing to talk about this. There's increasing public recognition, and the need for accessible treatment is increasing as well. If we think back to 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic began, we have seen an increase in mental health issues since that time. I think that increased a lot of isolation for people. People had increased feelings of insecurity, sadness, anxiety, and a lot of misinformation. The most current data I was able to find was from 2022, and it said about 23% of adults in the US currently suffer from some type of mental illness, and I'm sure there are many more people that have not been diagnosed. These have all led to psychological and psychiatric help as the most sought after form of health support needed today. There are a number of different types of mental health disorders, and on the screen you can see here are some of the common mental health disorders with their typical symptoms. Currently, treatment options primarily rely just on medication, but medications can often have several side effects as well. So today we're going to talk about how can nutrition impact mental health and what are some of the options and potential research, what is the research showing. So there is a correlation, we do know that, and this correlation is shown to be kind of bi-directional between nutrition and mental health. So as humans, our relationship is very complex, I would say, with food. Food can be nourishing, it can be enjoyable, we use it for social events, and it can also be soothing. And when I talk about bidirectional, what I'm meaning is that your mood can influence what you choose to eat, and in turn, eating can impact your mood and your psychological well-being. So I'm going to talk about today some of the issues that come when we choose to eat highly processed foods that tend to be poor in nutrients. A lot of times they tend to be high in energy that leads to excess calories. Sometimes that leads to excess body weight. And all of those things together affect our mood, and then our mood can drive what we eat. So if we're feeling down or depressed or we have anxiety, we may turn to simple, easy comfort foods that give us a feeling of feeling better for a few minutes. But again, those tend to be ultra processed foods, and this creates a cycle of what we're choosing to eat and how that's affecting our overall mental health. There is a new area of study, and it's called nutritional psychiatry. And this is a practice that is using food and food supplements as an alternative treatment for mental health disorders. And so instead of just treating the symptoms that people have, they are looking at using food to address some of the underlying concerns that may be leading to some of these mental health disorders, because we know that diet is just as important for mental health as it is to our physical health. There are 4 predominant connections between food and mental health based on what is currently known in the research. So I'm going to discuss each of these today. And the first is the impact of unhealthy diets on mental well-being. So I want you to consider how you would explain the standard American diet to someone. What words, thoughts, and food come to mind? So again, thinking, what do Americans eat if you were to try and describe this? If I were to describe this, and based on what I've seen, I would say in general, low fruit and vegetable intake, high intake of refined grains, which are our white flour, white bread type products, a lot of fried foods because we eat out a lot, ultra processed foods and meats, high intakes of red meat. In general, we're consuming too much sodium or salt, saturated fats, and then a lot of sugar sweetened beverages. So I want you to decide also if this is the type of diet that you're typically following, and these are the types of food patterns that you're seeing. This chart was created and released by the USDA, and it compares the current dietary guidelines with how many Americans are currently eating based on that standard American diet. So simple explanation of this chart, the orange bar graphs show the percentage of people that are not meeting the recommended intakes for our food groups. And then at the bottom, people that are consuming too much of the foods that we should have limited amounts in our diet. The blue bar is showing the people that are meeting the recommendations for our food groups. And then at the bottom, you can see the people that are meeting the limited intakes that are set for those nutrients. So just as a couple of examples, so you can see the vegetable category, the orange bar is showing that about 85% of the American population is not getting enough vegetables or not meeting that recommendation. The other part of that is about 15% are, and at the bottom you can see if we look at sodium, about 90% of the population is above the limit, consuming more sodium than we should be having, and then about 10% is meeting that recommendation or that limit that's been set. So I think it's pretty easy to see that if we're following that standard American diet, that we're falling short of many of the nutrients that we should be getting in our diet. This is typically because people are overfed, meaning they're getting too many calories, but they're undernourished because they're not eating enough real food. This type of an eating pattern can result in a number of different nutrient deficiencies, and many of these deficiencies have been shown in research to be a risk factor for developing one of many different types of mental health disorders. So the research does show that there are several nutrients that we need to have in our diet on a consistent basis to support brain health. So the brain is a very demanding and probably the most demanding organ in our body. So if you look at all these different nutrients on the screen here, these are all required for our brain to function properly. So the first category, the carbohydrates, our brain requires about 20 to 30% of all the energy we consume each day to function properly. And the preferred energy source of our brain is glucose, and the primary source of glucose is carbohydrates. So we want to make sure we're eating consistent meals and that we're getting good complex carbs in our diet. I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about each of these nutrients and how their deficiency is related to mental health, and then steps you can take to make sure you're getting enough of each of these nutrients so that you can have the best mental well-being that you can. So proteins are made up of building blocks called amino acids. So when you eat any form of protein in your diet, Once it's consumed, your body starts to break that protein back down into these individual amino acids. And then these amino acids are used for various things throughout our body. Several of the amino acids are considered essential, meaning your body can't make them and you have to get them through diet. And many of these essential amino acids are precursors, meaning that they're needed to produce and use neurotransmitters effectively throughout the body. So neurotransmitters are the body's chemical messages, and they allow the brain to send signals out and help with different functions throughout the body. So one example of an essential amino acid is tryptophan. So tryptophan is a precursor to the neurotransmitter called serotonin. So serotonin is often used as kind of the first line treatment of medications if people have different types of mental health disorders. So serotonin is, if you have good high levels of serotonin, it has a positive effect on mood, it helps with sleep, helps you feel good, feelings of joy. But with low levels of serotonin, we have the opposite effect. See mood changes, depression, and anxiety can come. So if you're not getting enough protein and providing those necessary amino acids, it can have a negative effect on these different neurotransmitters in our body and have an effect on your overall well-being. Protein can be found in many different food sources throughout the body. And what I wanted to focus on is to make sure that you're getting enough protein in each of your meals. So general recommendation for most people is you should be getting between about 20 to 30 grams of protein at each meal. And then make sure that you're getting protein from a variety of sources. So you can see in here, lean meats, dairy, eggs, legumes, which are your beans, nuts and seeds are all great options for getting protein. I think a lot of times people may think they're getting enough protein and you may not be getting enough protein. So maybe just spend a little bit of time as you're preparing meals and you're sitting down to eat to consider, do I have enough protein at my meals? If you're eating lunch right now, maybe consider what you had for breakfast or if you had any snacks today. I'm going to give a couple of examples of how to make sure and just kind of evaluate if you're getting enough protein with your meals. So say a typical breakfast, maybe you had pancakes this morning for breakfast. Pancakes, most general pancake mix is just a kind of a refined white flour, not a lot of protein, a little bit of butter, syrup, you're not getting much protein there. So in order to balance this meal out a little bit, if you were still wanting pancakes, say maybe not have as many pancakes and then add some healthy protein to it. So have an egg with it and then have maybe turkey sausage or turkey bacon if you're wanting to add something else. That would help balance out the meal a little bit better. If you have a bagel for breakfast with jam on it, instead of just jam, maybe replace that with peanut butter or almond butter, top it with some nuts. It's a great simple way to add a little bit of protein, or even having a glass of milk with it would be a better option getting some protein with breakfast. For a snack, I know a lot of people like to use yogurt for snacks. Yogurt's great, but a healthier option instead of buying yogurt with fruit already in the bottom of it would be to buy, I usually always recommend doing Greek yogurt because Greek yogurt has quite a bit more protein in it. And then you can add your own fruit, but most importantly to get the protein, I would suggest chia seeds or even some chopped nuts that you can put on that. Increase the protein, a great healthy snack option. Also, instead of just having plain fruit by itself, whether it's an apple or a banana, add protein to that as well. So you can pair apple with peanut butter or any of the nut butters, have nuts on the side, or even string cheese, something that's going to give you a little bit of protein. And that's going to really help keep good levels of protein throughout the day. So the next are healthy fats. The brain is actually composed of 60% fat, so it's really important that you have healthy fats in your diet. If you look back and remember the graph I showed a minute ago, the typical standard American diet has too much saturated fat, which are the fats that are solid at room temperature. So we don't want to avoid eating fats in our diet, but we want to replace them with healthier fats, which are typically liquid at room temperature or found in some of our plant-based foods. So research has shown that really the fats that we want to look at if we're looking at mental health are the omega-3 fatty acids. So I've listed the 3 most common fatty acids, the EPA, DHA, and ALA, that are found in the research. We know these reduce inflammation. They're shown to help lower rates of depression. DHA and EPA are found primarily in seafood and fatty fish, and then ALA is a plant-based source of omega-3. So once you consume that ALA is converted into DHA, but it's not done very well, but at least we're getting some, especially for someone that doesn't like fatty fish. So maybe consider the types of fats that you currently have in your diet. If you're eating a lot of butter or you cook with a lot of butter, think about, can the recipe or whatever I'm cooking, can that be switched and used a liquid-based oil? So the oils I have listed on here are all great options and will help provide some of those omega-3 fatty acids. If you can find ways to add nuts, either as snacks or add them to oatmeal or add them to salads or anything that you're eating. And then including the recommendation for fish is 2 to 3 times a week. Olives are great, avocados, and then all these different types of seeds are good plant-based sources to getting omega-3 fats in our diet. When we consume a diet like the standard American diet that is highly processed, we are at risk for several nutrient deficiencies. And based on the research, what they're showing is that there are several B vitamins that are needed for the production of neurotransmitters. And when our diet is really refined, there is a high risk for several of these B vitamins being low in our diet. So I'm going to cover just a few of them. So folate is needed for the production of several neurotransmitters. Folate you can find mostly in leafy greens, orange juice. By law, it is required to have folic acid, which is a synthetic form of folate, added to all fortified grains in the US to try and help increase our production. Vitamin B12 has been shown to prevent depression and dementia, but for a lot of people as we get older, as we're getting over the age of 50, there is a common risk for a high chance of being deficient in B12. So if you're taking any kind of an acid reflux medication, if you're on a diabetes medication called metformin, those put you at a high risk for B12, especially the longer you use them. Vegetarians are at a high risk if they're not really careful because we only get B12 from animal products. Also, as we get older, the way that we absorb B12, we're not able to absorb it as well. So this is one nutrient. If you're not eating a lot of animal products or you're over the age of 50 or taking those medications, it may be a good idea to have your B12 checked and to see if you need to use some type of a supplement. The other 2 vitamins that we've seen issues with that are directly related to mental health is B12 because it's needed for the conversion of that amino acid tryptophan to serotonin. We can get B6 from a variety of food sources, but again, if most of our food is refined, we're eating out a lot or we're just not eating a lot of good whole foods, we can be deficient. And then the other one is vitamin D, and vitamin D is needed for, again, the synthesis of several neurotransmitters, and this has directly been shown to increase the risk of depression if there is a deficiency of vitamin D. It's also really interesting because it's shown that if you're deficient in vitamin D, you also have similar symptoms as those people that have been diagnosed with depression. So things like fatigue or mood changes, loss of interest in different types of activities. So the complicated thing with vitamin D is there are not very many good food sources of vitamin D. The best source is fatty fish, and if you're not consuming 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish a week, then there's a good chance that you could be low in vitamin D. If you're eating eggs from chickens that are free range, they're outside, eggs, the yolk can be a good source. If you're buying eggs from chickens that are inside, then it's not a good source. But we can also get some vitamin D from fortified dairy products like milk. Some orange juice is fortified with vitamin D. But really the best source for most people is going to be the sun. When your skin is exposed to sunlight, it actually makes vitamin D from cholesterol. But again, this can be affected by several things. We're cautioned to stay out of the sun to help reduce our risk for skin cancer. As we get older, that conversion isn't as efficient. If you're using sunscreen, if you have a darker skin tone, and then also when the UV rays aren't as strong. So as we're going into winter months, that all of those things contribute to less vitamin D being produced. So again, this is a good one to look and see what you're eating, maybe consider your age, and then consider having your vitamin D checked and seeing if a supplement is needed. So as we go through all of these nutrients, I want to point out that there is not one food or one nutrient that really is responsible for promoting overall well-being or specifically improving mental health, but really we want to look at the dietary pattern as a whole. What are things that we should be eating that are going to help us the most? And based on the research, there are several diets that have been studied and been shown to be beneficial for mental health. This is an area where there is still more research that needs to be done, but there is good research showing that these can be beneficial. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes going through each of them, and maybe you'll be able to identify something that interests you, a pattern of eating that you would like to follow, or even just incorporating a few meals. If you don't follow these specifically, just adding more of these types of meals into your diet can be beneficial as well. So the Mediterranean diet has been ranked the #1 diet over the last several years. And this diet is based on the eating habits of people that live in areas that border the Mediterranean Sea. So they find these people eat lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of grains, potatoes, beans, nuts, and seeds, and that their primary source of fat in their diet is olive oil, and that they have low to moderate amounts of dairy, eggs, fish, and poultry. So I just wanted to show a few meal ideas that incorporate these types of eating patterns. So you can see there's lots of color, there's lots of fresh whole foods, and these are going to help contribute to a variety of healthy nutrients that we need so that we're getting a good balanced diet. The next is the DASH diet, and this stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. So this usually was recommended for people that wanted to lower their blood pressure. You can see on the slide here, it lists all the foods that we want to include more of in our diet and those that we want to limit. This varies a little bit from the Mediterranean diet in that it has more dairy, more fish, more poultry, and we're not using olive oil exclusively. So these are some simple ideas for some meals, doing maybe whole grain bread for breakfast, topped with some healthy nut butter with fresh berries. You could do leafy greens with whole grains, lean meats for lunch, and then dinner doing a fatty fish like salmon with some good dark green veggies, maybe like asparagus. That would be a good, simple way to get a lot of these nutrients and to follow the eating pattern of a DASH diet. The MIND diet actually combines different areas of the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet, and it was developed to help specifically with cognitive health in older adults. They looked for specific nutrients and foods in people that were older that had good brain function, and then they came up with these very specific recommendations on what to eat and how often to eat. This is one eating pattern, the MIND diet, that still I think it needs a little bit more research, but it does incorporate some of these healthy aspects of both of those other diets that we know work well. There is a lot of research on the Mediterranean diet as well. You can see these are common foods, so good whole foods, nuts, seeds, getting most of the protein from plant-based foods. With vegetarian diet, even if you aren't a strict vegetarian, I think there is a place to add some vegetarian meals just to help increase our intake of fruits and vegetables. and also to help lower the amount of saturated fat we're getting in our diet. And then the last is the anti-inflammatory diet. So we know that a lot of chronic diseases like cancer and cardiovascular disease and several types of mental health diseases, that they have been linked to chronic inflammation. So if we can eat more foods in our diet that have anti-inflammatory properties, then we think we'll be able to lower the risk of some of these different types of chronic diseases. So these are things like lots of fruits and veggies because they have a lot of natural antioxidants, folate, fiber, and then nuts and seeds can all help as well. So if you look at all these diets together, you can see really their goal is to provide good nutrition for our body and then specifically for our brains. So I mentioned earlier, the brain is very highly metabolic. It needs a lot of calories. We want to make sure we're providing it with the healthy fats, the healthy amino acids, and the vitamins and minerals that it needs. But we also know that a very important part of brain health is directly linked to our gut. So this is a big new area of research that's been occurring over the last several years, but our gut is actually referred to as our second brain. And the brain and the gut communicate back and forth, send messages to each other. But we know the health of our gut directly influences neurotransmitters, stress and anxiety, has an effect on our mood and our behavior. So we want to make sure that we have a healthy gut. So in our gut, it's called the gut microbiome, and there are trillions of these microorganisms that live in our gut. There's bacteria, there's different viruses, different fungi, and these are balancing each other. And we want to make sure we have a good, healthy, diverse microbiome so that the gut can function properly with the brain, because if there's imbalances in our gut microbiome, it can disrupt that communication. And research has shown that people that have been diagnosed with anxiety and depression do have an altered gut microbiome. So we want to take care of our gut. The better we feed it, the better it's going to be. So what can you do? We do know about 20% of the variation in the gut microbiome is directly linked to diet. So there's a couple different types of foods that most of the research has shown affect gut health. So the first are probiotics, and these are foods that contain live bacteria and yeast, and it can be found in fermented and pickled foods such as kimchi, sauerkraut, and different types of yogurt. You can also get probiotics in different supplements, but you can also consume something called prebiotics, and these are mostly non-digested fiber that come from all different types of plant products. So because we're not digesting fiber, the fiber actually travels to the lower part of our digestive system, where it becomes a food source for this healthy bacteria in our gut. So this can have a very beneficial effect on maintaining overall good gut health, which directly impacts our mental health. If you know when you look through these different diets, or maybe you're considering how you eat, if you think there really is not a chance that you're going to be consistently meeting your recommendations, then I do think it's important to consider the possibility of using a supplement. If you do want to use a supplement, if you're on any medications, I always recommend talk to your doctor first to make sure there's not any interactions. But then you want to pick a good, reputable supplement that doesn't provide more than 100% of the RDA. There's not a good reason, and it can cause problems if you start taking mega doses of individual amounts of nutrients. So just 100% of the RDA is what we're looking for. So in summary today, what action steps can you take based on what's been discussed today to improve your mental health? So 4 things I would recommend is eat regular meals and snacks. This will provide the energy that your brain needs. Consider following one of the healthy eating patterns discussed today. I personally think one of the simplest tips to improve your diet would to always try and have a fruit and or a vegetable at every meal and snack. They can be fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. But we know that most people are consuming very few, if any, fruits or vegetables. So this is a great, simple place to start. Okay, make sure you're getting enough protein in your diet, and then work to improve your gut health through consuming probiotics and those prebiotics. So knowing that food does affect mood, and a poor diet can increase the risk for several mental health disorders, what will you do? If there was one thing you could start doing today or this week to better nourish your body and improve your brain, what would it be? So I want to encourage all of you to pick one simple, easy thing that you can start doing today that will provide better nutrition for your body and support your overall health and your overall well-being. So thank you everyone for joining me today.